Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Brock University panel discussion on soccer. My name is Teresa Russo, and I am the instructor of the Italian-Canadian course here in the Italian Studies program and Canadian Studies program at the Department of Modern Languages, Literatures, and Cultures. The course I teach is called Italians in Canada and Italy-Canada Relations. In this course, students discuss the history of Italian immigration, heritage, culture, customs, language, and theories like multiculturalism, transnationalism, and bilingualism. This year, in anticipation of the Summer Canada Games in Niagara, I have added topics on sports industry in celebration of the Games coming to the region in 2022. And we're happy to have this panel discussion on soccer with two great national and international soccer players from Ontario, Paul Stalteri and Carmelina Moscato. The department has collaborated with the Center for Sport Capacity to bring you this event, and I am very grateful to the Brock University Canada Games Teaching and Learning Grant for sponsoring this panel discussion today. Thank you to all of you for joining us here at this event. I will be asking a few questions based on some topics discussed in our course, and then we will open to the questions from our audience. Let me begin by introducing our speakers for this panel today. Now, we're running a little late because we are having some technical difficulties. Paul will be coming on shortly, but let me introduce Paul and Carmelina, and then we'll see if he's on and maybe even start with Carmelina. Paul Andrew Stalteri is a Canadian former professional soccer player. He played his first international match for Canada with the under-17 youth team in 1993, and he remained a frequent starter for the Canadian national team ever since. His fondest memories with the Canadian soccer program remain the success he and his U20 teammates experienced in 1997, when they advanced to the second round in the U20 World Cup, and of course winning the Gold Cup in 2000. He currently holds the record for most appearances on the Canadian men's national soccer team. He spent most of his professional career in Germany, winning the league and cup double with Werder Bremen in the 2003-2004 season. He made 170 appearances in the German games and played additional 69 premiership matches with Tottenham Hotspur and while on loan to Fulham FC. Paul Stalteri is the first Canadian international to score in the German Cup and was inducted into Canada's Soccer Hall of Fame in 2017. He currently serves as an assistant coach for York 9, a Canadian Premier League. Paul also brought back with him to Canada the player development used in Ontario for youth soccer. And then our other speaker, Carmelina Moscato, is a Canadian former professional soccer player, making her Canadian U20 national team debut at age 16 in 2001, after an appearance in the Canada Games in 2000. During her professional career, Carmelina was a member of Team Canada's historic bronze medal win at the Olympics in London 2012. She has participated in 3 FIFA Women's World Cup teams, 2003, 2011, and 2015. Her professional playing soccer career ended in 2016 in Australia, where she played for Western Sydney Wanderers in the W League. She also played professionally for clubs in Italy and Sweden. She was the head coach of the U15 Canadian national team that won silver at the 2016 U15 CONCACAF Championships, as well as an assistant with U20 national team in 2018 and 2020. She was also a Canadian Soccer Rex talent manager from 2017 to 2018, and she has joined Canadian Soccer Business as the manager of women's professional football development. I also want to point out, since this is an Italian-Canadian course, that Carmelina was born in Mississauga, Ontario, to Sicilian-born parents, and Paul was born to an Italian father and a Guyanese mother in Etobicoke, Ontario. Welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for being here today. And wow, what resumes and what careers you both have had. I didn't even mention your collegiate soccer career. So there's so much to talk about when it comes to your careers. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Teresa. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Let's start. I don't know if we have Paul yet.
I think he's on his, I'm pretty sure he's on his way.
So why don't we start with the first question, and then we'll catch him up when he gets in. Maybe both of you can start by telling us about your experience in soccer before your national and then international status. Did you always just play youth soccer in your communities, or did you play other sports as well? What experience did you have with access to coaches when you first began your careers and in the different stages of your careers? There are different models today for soccer and also other youth sports, such as recreational travel teams, select teams, academies, development models. What was your path and what type of training guided your career before entering nationals?
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. It's always a good question. Sometimes we talk about the achievements, but the journey there, I think, is the best part. So, you know, growing up, I started at the age of 4, started kicking around because, you know, typical story, actually, just my brother played and I wanted to always be close to him. He was a role model for me. So I would chase, you know, even get in the way of his own team warm-ups. And remember, he's 10 years older than me. That was always very interesting. Hey, welcome, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. So I ended up, you know, at the age of 4, signing up, and obviously just to get some energy out. That's really, it was a very pure story that way. Nothing, just wanted to kick around. And my whole life, I enjoyed other sports. I loved playing volleyball and basketball, and I did so in college and even elementary school. Track before I realized I wasn't the fastest human being, so I stopped with track. But yeah, so my pathway was pretty traditional. You know, I started with, it went pretty cookie cutter at the time. It was, you know, fun house league soccer. At the time, we called it rep soccer. At the age of 10, I began rep soccer at the age of 10, believe it or not. And then, you know, how could you really tell if a 10-year-old's in a rep level? That's pretty tough. But I guess I played rep, and then I went through the provincial program, youth national, full national, all by the age of 19. So it all happened quite quickly, and right around the age of 15, the high performance or the next level started for me. Yeah, nowadays it's not as sort of clear. You have to be part of certain programs, but nonetheless, talent ID is alive and well, and anybody who has a dream can still make it very well in today's day and age, although the system has changed a little bit. I think I answered most of those questions. Yeah, like our teams were all travel teams after the age of 13. We traveled all across the province and even down to the States for certain showcase tournaments or regular tournaments, to be honest, to change the type of teams we were playing. So we traveled a lot, and I remember that being some of the best memories I had, because you would be with your friends and the little sisterhood that you have with your team. And I honestly was very blessed. The last thing I'll say is my brother coached me. So my access to coaching was in the home. It started at a ball at my feet at 4 years old, and he took on my little rep team for about 7 years. He stuck with me.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so my brother was my first next level coach, and he showed me all my skills and would, you know, give me extra sessions in the backyard when I really wanted them. So very lucky that way, had a lot of support from the family.
Oh, that's wonderful. Great. Paul, we're talking about how you started out in soccer and what your pathway was before nationals and how you got to that level and that wonderful career. We just I've introduced you in your bio, and it's an amazing resume, the national and international level of soccer you played.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for having me on. And I caught a little bit of Carmelina's development as a player when she was young. It sounds very, very similar to mine in terms of how we probably very similar time frame when we grew up playing, where you just joined the local house league program. It was back then, I guess, we called it house league instead of recreational, that they call all these proper words that they use nowadays. So we joined the house league program back in the, you know, a long, long time ago. Myself and my brother, we joined playing together at that time in Brampton, where I grew up. So I joined the Brampton local youth soccer club, and we started playing from there. And then I played at the Brampton Youth Soccer Club for a number of years until I switched over to Malton, where I played the majority of my time after about the age of 12, 13 years old. But very similar to Carmelina's, where you played the club level of football for a number of years, and then you get to a point where you join the provincial program, or you're invited into a provincial program. You kind of, let's say, make that team or make that program. And it was a 6-month, it was kind of at that time of, when we grew up, it was a winter program or fall winter program, more or less, where you would, we didn't have any of the nice, fancy, beautiful indoor facilities that they have now with these nice big bubbles or things like that. We trained outside for the entire winter, believe it or not. So we trained on asphalt turf. It wasn't even the nice turf that they get now. So we had to train on that, and we trained throughout the winter months with the provincial program, and that was every Saturday and Sunday, really early, either at Ivowin Stadium or downtown at Lamport Stadium. So that program ran on the weekends throughout the winter months, and then when that was kind of done, we rejoined our club team, and we went and we played the spring, summer into the fall with our club, and so we did that for a number of years, and then, similar to Carmelina, joined the under-17 national team program, and then the under-20s after that, and so forth and so on. And then I think I made my national team debut right around, I think it was about 19 or 20 when I made my first A cap for the senior team. So that was kind of mine, very similar to what I caught from Carmelina. Yeah, it was in terms of coaches, I didn't have a number of coaches. I had a couple in Brampton. And my coach in Malton was the same coach for a number of years, which we had a great connection to. Someone I still keep in contact with and have a good little relationship with as well. So, yeah, it was good that I didn't have probably a number of coaches in terms of I was happy in the place I was at. I didn't change a lot of clubs. I wasn't one player that changed places every year or so. And that tends to be a lot of problems for a lot of young players nowadays, that they don't like what's going on, so they switch something and they go find something new, and then that usually lasts about 6 months to a year, and then they switch to another place. So I found something that I was comfortable with, and stayed with that club for a number of years, and had some real good, some fun success, and loved every minute of it. That's probably the most fun you're going to have in football, I think, was when you were that age, and you're playing with your friends, and you go to training, and you have fun, and you compete at a high level, and that was probably some of the best memories I've had as a player.
Great, wow, roots. That's what it sounds like. Make roots and stay with a club and develop in that club, right? That's what it sounds like you both did. And then you managed all that too with high school, I suppose. Going to school, you were never homeschooled.
Very similar. I played a lot of no other organized sports, so to say, for another club or anything, but I played definitely a lot of high school sports, elementary sports growing up. Every sport that that was the theme of the time of the calendar year, I'd play, whether it was track and field, basketball, volleyball, whatever was off at the time, I would join up and play. Probably more serious, similar to Carmelina, I didn't belong on the track. That was for sure. That wasn't my specialty, unless it was a longer event. Then I could hold my own. But slowly found out that the 100-meter sprint wasn't mine, so I had to bail on that. But basketball and volleyball I took relatively serious in high school, and played a lot of that right the way through, all the way for the 4 or 5 years that I was at high school. At that time, I had participated and played in that level throughout that time as well. So yeah, that was a great experience to have another avenue, another sport, or another couple sports that you could take. Not as serious as football growing up, but it allowed you to learn a lot of different aspects of different sports as well at the same time.
Right. And now I know, Carmelina, you were at the Canada Games, right? Maybe if you both can talk about how does one get into the Ontario Games and the Canada Games? Because these games start at 12 years old. You can be in these games at 12 to about 18. And so this is something that, well, like I said, Canada Games are coming to Niagara. So how do students get involved in these type of games?
Yeah, I'll start off by saying that, first of all, I found the medal. Funny enough.
That's great.
In the archive. So, that was in 2001, Canada Games. And I remember it being a really solid group of women, young women from Ontario that came together that we had previously represented our province. So it was the provincial representative team that went on to represent Ontario in Canada Games. And I remember it being, any competition at that age teaches you how to perform under pressure. And I remember as soon as you get into the arena, the figurative arena, right, where you're playing other provinces, there's a lot of pride in representing where you come from, playing a brand of football that you've been working so hard to showcase and show off. And, it was a very competitive group at that time. I think Paul could probably relate to this. The generation, so I was in 84. I know that seems probably ancient to some students on the call. But, as an 84, we had a very strong generation within 1 year. It's like 84 is 85. So a lot that went on to play, full national team, Robin Gale, most notably, Melanie Booth, Cara Lang. I mean, we were very, very solid group. And I remember being a young player on an older team. So I was dealing with not only, so I was playing up a few ages. I think I was 16 playing with 18-year-olds, right? And that is always a different, unique challenge. But it was a highlight for me. I mean, you get ready to play in the big game, right? And anytime you get a chance to do that, you practice. You practice how you cope with the pressure and how you perform. So, and plus, it was a lot of fun. I have to emphasize that. The girls were amazing. So it's
the club that you belong to, that club entered into the Ontario Games or the Canada Games, but they also had to have a certain, I guess, record in order to do that?
Well, it was the Ontario got to pick their team. So it was more so they picked from the clubs in the area, which ones were sort of the best, and they would go through trials and all the rest of it. And then eventually that was a big prize.
So, wow, that's amazing. That's really great. Paul, did you have any experience of these games too as a youth?
No, I never played in them. I never participated in the actual games in that per se. It was more when I grew up playing, like I said, when you kind of made the provincial team or made the provincial program. The only thing we did was play other provinces in a national championship kind of thing where we played Ontario against Quebec, BC, Manitoba, etc. So that was it's a different competition, but that's more the provincial program. That's what we had done at that time when I played. So not necessarily the similar, not necessarily playing in those games like Carmelina did, for sure not.
Okay, great. A very high competitive level, both of you, it sounds. Another question I have is in this course on sports industry this year, we're considering Canadian nationalism in sports, looking at community sports within Canadian immigrant and ethnic groups, gender inequality in sports, how sports cafes in Italy play a role in Italian communities, and Italian Canadians as fans. You're welcome to discuss any of these if you have anything to say about these topics. When it comes to the topic on fans, particularly, we looked at in this course how the largest post-war gathering of Italians in Canada was in 1982 when Italy won the World Cup. So that after Italians were labeled enemy aliens and interns during World War II here in Canada, it was a soccer game that really drew Italians out of the shadow after an embarrassing moment in history to gather in the streets. And that was in 1982. And again, similarly, in 2006, Italy won the World Cup. And there was also another large crowd at Market Lane here in Vaughan and then on College Street in Toronto. And I'm assuming the same happened in Montreal and maybe in other Italian communities across Canada. Do you remember those moments in 1982 or 2006?
Well, for 82, I think Carmelina just answered that question for you. I was very, very young as well. So small, very, very small memories of 82 being so young. You probably see things later on when you're growing up that kind of remind you more of 82 and Paolo Rossi and him scoring and leading the tournament in goals and whatnot, and Italy lifting the trophy. So very, very vague memories. 2006, obviously much, much more. Knowing that tournament and remembering that very, very well. The tournament was held in Germany where I played a number of my where I played a lot of my career. So that was a big preparation for a number of years leading up into that tournament. Living in Germany at the time and understanding what they went through to get the tournament and how much planning they had to host that kind of an event. So that was something special as well, because I was kind of living that during the time, the preparation, the 3, 4 years, 5 years that these guys put into the preparation for such a big event. And, I got to firsthand see what was going on in the country and how much infrastructure was being built and how the stadiums were being changed and redeveloped or even torn down and built again. So all the stadiums that we played in leading up to that event were all modern. They were all redone or, like I said, rebuilt. So it was great to see that, and it was fantastic as a player because you got to play in all brand new stadiums. So that was great.
All right.
As well. So I got to see that. So 2006 is very, very memorable in that sense. And I kind of lived that in both ways, because I stayed in Canada I was here in Toronto for, I'd say maybe half the tournament, if I remember right. So I knew you kind of follow the games, the group games first, and then you see the knockout stages. And then once the knockout stages came around, I returned back to Europe. At that time, I was now playing in England, so I returned back to England to kind of probably watch the quarterfinals on. So I kind of got the experience to see what it was like here in Toronto, I'd say for half the tournament, and then the rest of it overseas again, and to experience what it's like to be in Europe during the time of a World Cup, which was something special. But no doubt, you see as the tournament progresses, you see the enthusiasm, you see the fans, you see the number of people, the Italian community getting well into the team and getting well as the team's progressing, as the team is doing well and better in the tournament. You see the enthusiasm building and building and building, and you see that in all the cultures, whether it be the Portuguese, the Brazilians, the Spanish, the English. That momentum builds throughout a tournament. It's almost like being a player in a tournament. And Carmelina probably knows as well, even better than me sometimes, is that within that tournament, the groups, as you get better, the momentum builds, and it builds within the team. It builds within the entire, all the players and all the coaches within that team together, because you're away in this one little environment, and that obviously builds and builds and builds to something really special. And as you do better in the tournament, obviously when you're winning, things are better and easier to be a part of. And I think that's very similar to the fans. They get to experience that from the group stage, and once the knockout stage comes, the momentum builds with the people, and the belief builds with the people. And Italy hadn't won the World Cup since 1982, so you could see that momentum and that belief was building within the community here before I had left.
And Carmelina?
Yes. So thanks, Paul, for answering the one. I wasn't born in 1982. However, born into a very patriotic and proud family. So I heard a lot about it growing up, that's for sure. In 2006, I was actually just finishing up university, wrapping up my degree, and I was with friends down in the States. So I didn't get to experience St. Clair being completely huge party and what everybody, just the pride that exudes from that win. I remember being in love with the way Cannavaro played. So he inspired a lot about just sort of my center back, my center back inspiration was definitely sparked by Cannavaro and obviously some big stars on that team. So I just love how much excitement it brings to my parents. I had the opportunity. I was actually sort of scouted for Italy to play U19 in the Italian team, which, until you play an actual senior cap, you're not cap tied to any country. So I had the option, and I really explored playing for Italy as well. They recruited me around the age of 17 to go play there. And I remember thinking, like, what an experience that would have been. But it all circled back to the fact that I'm a very, very proud Canadian, Italo-Canadian for sure. Don't get me wrong, I'm first generation here. But even just thinking about, I don't have any regrets, but what would it have been like if I played for the Italian women's national team? What my experience would have been totally different competing in Europe, growing up in a place like that. So yeah, I always wonder about that. But you asked a few questions there. I'm going to hone in on something that's near and dear to my heart, which is gender inequality, social justice topics right now. As a female in this sport, I think all we're looking for is sort of equity, right? Just a bit of equity. Well, if
Yeah.
You know, we're looking at our sport in Canada here is we're very proud of the accomplishments of our teams. Both the men's national team are continually getting better. The women's national team has achieved the unthinkable, being on the bronze medal stage, you know, on the podium twice, back to back. I mean, that's never been done in our history. So we have to honor that. But when I look at the side of the game that I'm on now, which is the business side, and looking at the development and the business side put together, you know, what does the next 10 years look like? You know, I'm very pro women's sports professional leagues in this country. And I really believe that for this country to take the next step, yes, our top players are in great environments, but the rest of the players are going to need to sharpen their teeth on a day-to-day environment. So I'm working pretty hard with my team to make sure that's a possibility in the next decade, at the very least, to have our own professional women's sports leagues, which is a huge challenge. But I believe in terms of equality, what the country is going to need to stay competitive, to grow the player pool, and to really give the opportunity to the other 99% of women who are not in that upper echelon of competition, right? So I'm very passionate about that.
Great. Yeah, and one of the things we talked in our class, there's a book that came out in 2014 called Women's Soccer and Transnational Migration. And I was really stunned by the figure. It says 30 million worldwide soccer, the most prominent team sport among girls and women. However, making a living as a female player is only deemed possible in approximately 20 of the 150 FIFA-listed women's soccer countries. And this then the women will have to migrate. Skilled sportswomen in soccer has to migrate more so away from their homelands to find employment. And I don't know if those numbers are still the same today. That was a 2014 study. And we were, you know, stunned by only 20 teams of the 150 FIFA A-listed women's soccer teams can employ women. And so, and then that's a problem I guess you're seeing as well here in Canada of employment of women.
Yeah, it's, you know, making a living wage, professionalizing the sport. It's that the numbers are definitely much higher for Canadians now. I mean, we're the only full export country in the world. We're the only country that actually sends our players to other environments to develop. We have such a beautiful development system here. So when the time is right, I can see all the pieces falling into place and us offering that next level, which is that senior, high performance, you know, real professional level where women won't have to work another job to continue their career and sort of hope for the best, right? And it's taking a while. We're in the global trend of this becoming professionalized. It's not like we are a little behind, but not that far behind. We still can catch up. If you think, you know, last thing I'll say about this is Spain just became professional just now. And they've had, you know, La Liga on the men's side to help them get this women's part off the ground. In our CPL, I mean, Paul can speak to this, our CPL is 2 years old. You can't build off of the back of something that's just brand new. So we need to build together. And I really do feel within the next 10 years, we'll have something to be proud of, both genders.
I don't know if you wanted to comment on any of that, Paul.
No, Carmelina is right. I mean, it's a really difficult situation. I think even on the men's side, growing up, you had to almost leave the country as well if you wanted to make a living. So very similar on the men's side. When I was growing up, we had the old Canadian Soccer League, which was you had ambition to maybe play in, but that league did not last very long. It folded after a number of years. So there was a number of years there where it was the same thing for the men as well, that they had to, if you wanted to make any kind of a real living in the game, you had to leave as well. And you had to go either to Europe, and the MLS was just starting up. But at that time, there was no Canadian MLS teams. We had a few teams, Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver playing in the old, what they used to call the A League, which is where I started out actually playing with the Toronto Lynx. But that was a second tier level. That's so second tier level, you're talking what Carmelina said. You're not talking sometimes full-time wages. You're talking about being paid maybe 6 months out of the year, as opposed to 12 months out of the year. I used to have some guys on my team playing indoor and outdoor, trying to make a living. They were older guys, obviously trying to make a living. When you're a young player that of my age, you could live at home and make a living, that could last a number of years, but not your whole career. But at 18, 19, 20 years old, it was sufficient enough. But for the older players, that obviously wasn't enough. So they had to do other things to make ends meet and make a living out of the game. So much different than what it is now. Now you had the MLS teams. Now you have the three major markets in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver in the MLS, where Canadians can now play. They can be a part of their academy. And again, this is only on the men's side, where there's a big gap and a big hole for the women on their side of it, as Carmelina said. And in men's, now we have the CPL, which is a couple of seasons old. And this year it hurt the CPL quite a bit, not having to play a whole season. We were only fortunate enough to play only a tournament style a season for a month in Prince Edward Island. So the league got hit there as well, but only now is the men's side starting to not have to maybe export all their players outside of, I'd say, even North America, because a number of players still play in the MLS. And then you also have the young players, a huge opportunity now to play in the CPL. So that's a big thing for the men's side of the game. But again, if you're looking at both sides of it, Carmelina and I spoke earlier as well. There's a big gap for the women that don't have that opportunity at a certain age to continue playing and continue developing, which I'm hoping, and with a lot of hard work in the next number of years, that can finally solve that problem and have the women that opportunity to participate and keep playing at a higher level and being able to make some money out of the game. Because if you can't do that, then it's obviously impossible for anybody to work a job and play the sport at the same time. Because the problem with that is one thing, and it's not a professional after that.
Right.
To be a professional is very common sense, very easily to understand. Is you have to be able to make a living out of doing what you're doing, and not being forced to do a number of other things to make ends meet.
Right.
Very well said, Paul. I like that.
I have a question about, we didn't get to the topic of maybe how were your fans when you were abroad? Did they accept you as Canadian athletes when you were playing in the European clubs? And Paul, by the way, when you did go, I think it was in 1970s, it was difficult actually to migrate at that time and get jobs up in Europe, coming from Canada, with passports and all that as well.
Yeah, it was very difficult. I went over as a Canadian, not I was not fortunate enough to get my Italian passport or have a European passport like a number of other players that would come out either from North America. Carmelina, you have your passport?
I did. I got it. Yeah, around 2009.
Yeah, I wasn't fortunate enough to be able to get mine. I know a number of players I played with in even from South America that had their an Italian passport that they were able to get as well. But for a number of reasons, I just wasn't able to get mine, rules and whatnot. But so I went over as a Canadian and as a foreigner. So then you fall under different numbers, and you're only allowed a certain many foreigners in your club team that you play for. Every country is a little bit different. Germany has a limited number, so you're already taking a foreign spot, which is very unusual for Canadian to have. To get over there and before you can even be accepted by the fans, you got to prove yourself and be accepted by the team itself, right? So you can be signed, and your teammates are now looking at you, and again, you're there, you're signed, you're taking one of their positions, you're taking a position from perhaps a German kid that was there as well at that time. So now you've got to prove yourself first to your teammates and your coach before you can even step on the field to even think about proving yourself to the fans and whatnot in the foreign country that you're living in. So the first part of me being there was just developing and getting myself probably ready mentally more than anything to be prepared to play at that highest level. And that started every day in training and trying to win over not just the coach, but win over the trust of the players, your teammates. Because at first, when you go in there, there's definitely no trust. They're looking at you and they know you're trying to take one of their positions or their positions. So it's a tough one in any team sport when you come in as a new player, and especially at that time. When I first got to Germany, there was no Canadians ever played in the Bundesliga at that time. So myself, I was fortunate enough to be the first one alongside a good friend of mine named Kevin McKenna, who we both played at the same game, believe it or not, against each other, which we ended up being the first Canadians playing in the Bundesliga. So, you know, you're in that situation where, one, you're trying to gain the trust of the club, the players you're playing with, your teammates, your coach. And then once you've done that, then usually maybe you find yourself on the pitch, and then you've got to be able to now convince not just the fans, but at that time, and it still remains, is the massive influence is the media, and you've got to be able to now convince the media, and by your performances, obviously, that you're good enough to be there and you're good enough to play at that level. So there's a number of kind of ways to peel back that question. But I think the first one in that order, kind of, and then you know, the Germans, they're a tough nut to crack in one sense, but once you kind of, they do, you know, see your quality, fall in love with you, they do like you, and you know, you're a big part of their culture. And once you've adapted to that culture and you're in there and you're living, you know, you have to live and be a part of their community and their culture there while you're there in another country. You can't live your own life and think that you can continue living a different life. Then you've got to integrate yourself into the community, learn the language, and be a part of them. And once you've done that, then you've kind of slowly gained their trust and slowly gained the respect of your teammates, your club, your coaches, and then obviously the fans and the media as well.
Mm-hmm. And your whole family learned the language, right?
Eventually, yeah. Once I
was impressed.
Well, yeah. I mean, once I had the children, my wife, she learned the language quite well as well. She speaks languages. She's good in the languages, so she spoke German as well, living there for a number of years with me. My daughter, I mean, her German was better than mine at that. I mean, she would go from German to English like it was like nothing in the park with her friends. She would so her you know, she started learning German in school, so her German was really well. Unfortunately, we left kind of probably 2-3 years too early for that language to stick with her. I think if we stayed there another couple of years, it would have stuck with her a lot more. She might probably learn the language a little bit quicker than if she went back or took some courses in it, but there is a base there, no doubt.
Yeah,
but at that time, she was speaking. You know, she could speak German much better than I could.
And Carmelina, how about you? Your experience in Europe? How were the fans? I mean, was it similar to what Paul's saying, that you had to win over your coach and teammates first?
It's a little different. But before I go on, just congrats to Paul for being just such a trailblazer for Canadian men. I mean, to do what he did, you know, we're celebrating, you know, Alphonso Davies today, but that path has been paved, right? So well done, Paul, on that. I didn't realize you were me first. That is really, really impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, with regards to me, I think, I don't know if it's women's sports as a culture is a little different. I think they celebrated diversity, you know, by bringing in a Canadian. It was made a big deal, made to be a big deal in a way. Like, who is it? There's more of a curiosity around who is she? And, you know, a lot of little media outlets and interviews. And again, the women's game is not on as big a scale as the men's game, right? So I would say I was embraced without having to prove my talents, without having to prove my worth. It was just a big deal to land a deal with a foreigner. You know, that it's as simple as that. Like, and actually, I had 3 experiences overseas. I would define them even quickly. The one in Italy was for 10 months. I played for Tavagnacco, UPC Tavagnacco, right outside Udine. And, you know, I got to speak the language, and I spoke with my Sicilian dialect a little bit. So the girls would, you know, make a little fun of me because it's not how you say things around here. Yeah. So I went straight to school. I went to the university and I started taking intermediate classes because I wasn't at a basic level, but I needed to learn proper Italian, not my parents' dialect, right? Calling certain objects the wrong things. They would always make fun of me, but, you know, just as a joke. But anyway, so that was 10 months. And the biggest thing I remember, there's lots I could tell you, but the first thing was that was not a fully professional environment. So imagine, it's the only reason I'm there is to play football and to keep training, but these women had full lives. So I'd have to wait till 8 o'clock at night to train. So,
Okay.
you know, the whole day goes by and you're training at 8 o'clock, you're finished at 10 o'clock, you're wired, you know, all night. I remember I had some pretty weird sleep patterns and stuff at the time, and it was by myself. I was completely, you know, by myself. Although the girls were fantastic, it was still, you know, a little bit lonely at times. You're away from home, right?
Right.
And, you know, the other part, I went to Sweden, and that was only for 3 months. And myself, Melissa Tancredi, who's another fellow Italo-Canadian, and our friend Steph Labbé, we went to a club called Pitio to help them fight relegation so that they weren't in the bottom two. So we had a very specific task, and to keep them out of the bottom two. Proud to say we did, but it was a very short stint. And then my final season was in Australia. Probably the best time I'd have had in my life. Australians and Canadians are very similar. Very similar. We love to work hard. You know, we worked very hard, but we also very much enjoyed ourselves. So it was a perfect way to wrap up the career. And I got to speak English in 2 of the places, so I got lucky that way.
That sounds wonderful. It sounds great experience. You traveled there in Europe. And then, so you went from one country to the other?
No, I had breaks with the national team because our national team was pretty much full time during certain parts of that story. So if I wasn't with a club, I was basically full time with the national team. And I forgot to mention I was in the NWSL for 2 years. So I was just south of the border playing and training down in the NWSL 2013-14. So yeah, I've had a lot of pro league experiences, honed in more on the 4-on-1. North America is quite North American. We all know what that sort of feels like. But yeah, so in between, I had some other experiences too.
Okay. Now you touched a bit on this question. In the class, the students look at the questions of ethnicity. And did ethnicity in any way play a part in your careers as athletes or as coaches? And you mentioned a bit there, Carmelina, when you were in Italy with language. Did your Italian background help or challenge access in your careers, or may not have played a part at all? And Paul, you have a multicultural background, so your identity is not only Italian Canadian. And so I don't know, maybe you'd like to start with that question, and maybe it didn't make a difference that you came from this ethnic background.
Yeah, I think growing up in Canada probably didn't make much of a difference. Playing anyways, I think growing up in Brampton, we had a number of a big community, a big Italian community, a big Portuguese community, a big Jamaican community. So we had a lot of different people that we played with and grew up with and playing with. My mother being Guyanese, growing up with a West Indian influence on one side, and then the Italian influence on the other side from my father's family and whatnot. So, but I don't think it was a big influence or a big difference or make any real difference growing up, whether you were Italian, Jamaican, Portuguese at that time in Brampton. You're just a young kid and you're just playing with your friends, and it didn't really matter what anybody was for us, to say the least. Going overseas, I think it's more, you know, when you are in Canada, everyone you'd say, okay, you're either you walk in, well, what are you? Everyone has their label. If they're Italian, if they're Portuguese, if they're French, if they're Spanish, if they're German, Jamaican, Trinidadian, whatever it could be. We tend to say that first before we even say Canadian a lot of times. So, and myself being guilty of that as well, growing up. But when you do go overseas and you understand, you know, it's if I try to make a story out of it, if I came into let's say a coffee shop in Woodbridge or a cafe here in Woodbridge, and you said you were Italian or whatever, chances are maybe they might speak Italian too, maybe they won't. You know, it's you know, you could get away with it. If you're in Germany, for example, and you go into an Italian restaurant and you tell them that you're Italian, you know Italian is getting thrown at you, and if you're not ready to answer that, you're in trouble. So you better not be saying that you have to be careful there, because if you do say you're Italian, you better be able to speak proper Italian to the people there. So then you slowly realize the moment you're asked what you are, you're telling them you're Canadian because you're not ready. Well, I wasn't ready anyway for sure to speak Italian to anybody at any proper level at any level, really. So unfortunately, I never really got to learn the language growing up. And it's that situation where your father's working and your mother's raising the kids at home. So you're not really learning the language. So when you are overseas, it is very clear. And some of my buddies even had that I played with. I know a lot of my, a good friend of mine had an Italian passport, couldn't speak any Italian whatsoever. And, you know, it's a shame in one sense, but he's kind of using the passport just to play as a European player, not really feeling no Italian whatsoever in him, because he has a grandmother that was Italian and he growing up in Peru. But you get to an Italian, you know, if you're landing in Italy and you're showing them an Italian passport and you can't speak Italian, it's a strange one, right? So it's one of those things that when I was over there, you slowly realize your first answer, to make a long answer out of this, your first answer is what you are is you're Canadian.
You're Canadian. It was safe to say you're Canadian. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say for me, like similar and different. The way it is different is my parents. So my dad worked, I mean, 24 hours a day kind of thing. That's what it felt like anyway. So my mom did raise, you know, four kids, and I was the baby by far. So, you know, I have a sister who's 12 years older, a brother the one who coached me, 10 years older, and then my other sister's 8 years older than me. So when I came along, they were already in high school. So it's almost like my parents had more time again. Had I been closer in age to them, I had no chance. But they actually, I'm going to say the word made me, because I was a child, but they made me go to Saturday school. So I would go to regular school and then on Saturday. So I did that till grade 8. So
you learned the language.
They did. I was, you know, again, I value it now. At the time, absolutely not. You're thinking, school 6 days a week. How does this make sense for any other, you know, none of my friends are doing this, Mom. So, but now I realize it gave me a great foundation to build on it. So I won't forget the rudiments and the fundamentals of the language. And then when I went there again as an adult, I was able to build on that. And now, you know, the game is so global. You know, I think of my aspirations to coach professionally one day. And, you know, there's opportunities in France and there's opportunities in Spain and Mexico for the women's game. And you're thinking to yourself, I believe I could pick it up based on my knowledge of the Italian language. I have every faith in the world that if I put attention to it, I could learn that. So I treat that as a bit of a gift, you know, that way. But I do identify as Canadian. I mean, with Paul, I know he will relate to this. Having worn the badge, you know, it's another, it's a patriotic feeling. Like, you know, there's two people that wear the badge, right? The ones that the military and courting teams, they get the honor of wearing the badge and to protect the country. Different realms. Don't get me wrong. I'm not comparing myself to the military, but what I am saying is you do feel that sense of pride in a very deep way. So I'm very happy
representing the country.
Yeah, exactly. And I very much feel proud to say I'm Canadian.
Great. Now you touched on you know, sports being global, and it was interesting around 2018, really around 2012, soccer was starting to become like bigger than ice hockey in Canada. And it was in the Canadian Youth Sports Report. Now, I should say this as amongst youth, right? And it was in the Canadian Youth Sports Report in 2015 that soccer has surpassed ice hockey. And then in that same study, when they asked parents, they found, and they said that they believe that soccer was a major international sport. 65% of the parents said that. And at the time in 2012, before that, General Secretary of the Canadian Soccer Association, he said that things are just getting started. In 2012 is the year of the momentum for Canadian soccer as a whole. And he said, citing world-class events hosted by the country. And when I zoned into that 2012 year, that's the year the women won the bronze medal.
Yeah.
And so in these statistics, it's starting to show that since 2012, soccer has been gaining momentum. Now, you both are coaches, and you've coached youth soccer, I believe. Is that correct, Carmelina? Did you want to say something about that and talk about youth coaching now, a career in coaching and youth soccer?
Go ahead, Paul. You can start us off.
Well, I think what's happened in Canada in the number of years that, especially since I've been back, if you compare the difference between how myself and even how Carmelina was brought up playing, it's night and day. I mean, the development has taken a completely different pathway. When you're a young player in let's call it the grassroots level, when we say grassroots in those ages, we're talking about probably 6 years to 12 years old, that kind of area there. The grassroots level of soccer has completely changed. The dynamic of it, the size of the fields, the number of players on the fields, the size of the goals, all these little things that have changed completely. Where when I was young, and Carmelina probably as well, we were playing 11v11 when we were like 6 years old, 7 years old, on a 100-meter pitch with a nets that are the size of. If you would compare that, I know. Without boring you guys too much, but there was a study done in England a number of years ago where they kind of put the goal size for an adult, what that would have been like for a young kid to be in, and this net was this gigantic, enormous thing that no human could even stop a ball in. So we would put the kids in this enormous net, and we'd have these fields that were gigantic, and it was just literally the fastest player with the ball would get it and run 80 yards up the field and score on this huge net. So that was our development playing in. Now it's completely different. The size of the field, like I said, when you're a young player, you're playing 4 against 4, 5 against 5. Then you're playing 7 against 7, 9v9, and then you're building yourself up. So there's a pathway of you're starting with small numbers on a smaller pitch with a smaller net. And then you're going to a bigger and bigger and bigger until you get to about 13 years old, where now you're playing in a full-size field and a full-size net with 11 players on each side of the pitch. So that in itself has changed the dynamic of football for our country, because that's allowed a number of different aspects and a number of different developmental ways of training and of playing. And our training system has changed completely during that time as well. So I got back through starting with those changes that just started to be implemented, and I think it's been in the grassroots side of it fantastic for our game. I think there's a lot of gaps still to be made. Once the kids hit 13, 14, 15 years old, I still think on both sides there's too many gaps, there's too many problems still that we can change and solve. But we're doing a very, very good job, I think, on both sides of the game, men and women, in the grassroots level, for sure. And I'd still like to see some better changes to the area, that high performance area, before you hit that 17, 18-year-old. I think between 13 and that 17 bracket, I still think we can do a little bit better on. But we're doing a good job in the grassroots, I think. And I think there's still a little ways to improve once we get to that older level.
Okay. Now, is this because I was told you brought a European model here to Canada? And
no, I can't take credit for. I wouldn't take credit for that. I would just say when I did get back to Canada, a number of changes were being done at the time. So being part of a lot of those discussions and being part of a lot of the panels and the different people making decisions and putting that in place, I just was kind of helping in that way. I wouldn't say I was doing anything that brought over anything that these guys were already thinking about before I even came, and doing that as well. And that job was being done for a number of years, and it took a number of years to implement. You have to really just think of the infrastructure alone, trying to change all the fields that are out there. They're all big fields. Everything was a big field the entire time we were growing up, and you needed to change the size of the fields, you needed to change the size of the goals, and so forth. And you needed to do that for all the different age groups. So that alone was a big ask for all the cities and the municipalities to change their infrastructure. And that took a number of years just to even implement that side of the game.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Wow, that's great description of the changes that's happened. Carmelina, did you want to add anything? Because you were part of, I think it was a Climb for Nobleton soccer club in Vaughan that you were helping there coaching.
Yeah. Yeah, I had 7 months as a technical director. You know, I tried out that that type of profession, and I learned a lot in a 7 months. So everything that Paul's saying is echoes true. So for example, you know, at certain age groups, you're going to need different size fields, like he mentioned. And if your municipality doesn't have those fields, it becomes a real challenge for the clubs to run proper programming in the way that they advise. And you have to be really creative, right? I can only imagine what technical directors are going through right now. Paul and I had a great conversation earlier, you know, with gyms shut down. I mean, we're in Canada, like gyms are a huge part of continuing programming throughout the year. And the fact that those are shut down, reduced number on turf fields now as part of the provincial government's guidelines and regulations around COVID, it's becoming a big challenge to even run, you know, any programs right now. But what I think Paul did well is sort of show the journey from 11v11 at 6 years old, when you get no touches on the ball, to small-sided games where you're touching the ball as often as you can in game situations. That's what kids need. They need to play. You know,
yeah.
We're not. The old way was putting them in perfect lines, and the coach looked good because the field was perfectly, you know, it looked like a little machine, you know, the kids were, but when they got into the game, maybe they couldn't make the right decision, or they had never seen those pictures before. So there's been a massive shift in philosophy and methodology that I think is improving our grassroots. And, you know, Paul and I know for sure would love to see us continue that progression all the way through to the senior game, that we improve that as well. But kudos to Canada Soccer for what they've done at the grassroots level.
Yeah, and I have to say, my son plays soccer. He's been playing since he was 4.5 in Vaughan in the teams, and I've seen that experience. And you're right, when these teams are smaller, when they're playing 3-3-5, they get to touch the ball more, and they get to understand how to maneuver the ball. They get more skills, and it's great to see that they're happy too. They're touching the ball, right?
That's it. And they're making decisions and they're having fun, right? Those are the keys. So, yeah.
And then to see them go into these games where they're against other teams in these competitions, and the field is the same. They learn at that smaller level, and then they just bring that up higher and higher. He's 10 years old now, so I've seen him in the different stages, and it's wonderful to see them grow that way too. Yeah,
and they've also changed how far parents are able to travel. That's another big thing. They put restrictions on areas because they don't want to see kids sitting in a car for 2 hours to go play a 30-minute game. Like, that's not a smart usage of time. So they've also created a guideline and a matrix to say, you know, these age groups, let's keep them here. Let's not make sure we're not throwing them into major competitive tournaments at this age. They're called festivals because we just want them to sort of play. Even the name festival changes the energy around the event, right? So a lot of changes have happened, and for the better.
Oh, that's great. And you touched a bit on this about coaching with these changes during the pandemic. I don't know if you wanted to say more about that, Paul. And then, Paul, you're also coaching, like we said, York 9, and if you wanted to talk about that experience as well.
Yeah, I'll touch
on now during the pandemic, actually, as well.
Just touch on the coaching during this this kind of a pandemic that we're all going through, and everyone's challenged no matter what in every aspect of life, whether it's school or whether it's your work or whether it's sports themselves. So definitely a challenge. It's really, really difficult because there's different stages. There's different stages as to how you can train, how you can play. Modified ways of playing, modified training sessions that you have to develop your players into. We went through that throughout the summer. We went through, you know, the beginning part where you were limited to, I think, 10 players on the pitch at a time, or 10 players on each side of the pitch, kind of thing, and no contact, no one could touch each other. You had to develop training sessions you have to think you're trying to, especially at a grassroots level, if you're on a grassroots level, even on older kids, you're trying to keep a training session together where they're interested. They want to be a part of it, but they can't play against each other. They can't play a game against each other, and they can't. That's all they really want to do is when is the game? When do we get to play? And you're taking that away from them. So you're trying to now get them, still liking the game and loving the game and wanting them to come back. And so it was a real big challenge for us in the early summer months, getting the kids back onto the pitch and where they belong. And like Carmelina said, we had spoken earlier, and the challenges for these young kids and retaining these kids in the sport, because once you do have that absence of, we went through, whether it was about 4 months there where they weren't playing, and the numbers. If you'd be interested to see, probably, if you did the survey and you see the actual registration numbers coming back, there's no doubt in my mind that they haven't dropped for sure. And if this continues to happen over the next number of months throughout the winter, I'm fearing that the summer months, that registration is going to be even lower. So it's a big challenge that we've got to kind of balance this, where in my mind, the kids still need an avenue to play. They still need an avenue to play their sports. It's such a healthy lifestyle for them to be a part of. Playing sports at a level where, a healthy level, not a crazy, I'm talking about it in a level where they're liking it and enjoying it. They want to be a part of it, whether that's, again, that could be any sport. It's not necessarily talking about soccer here. It could be any sport, but they need that outlet. They need that exercise. They need that physical, the ability to play something physically and mentally. It's a massive impact on these young kids, being able just to get out and be a part of a sport, and if it is a team sport, being with their friends and being on the field and just being able to enjoy it. And when you take that away from them, and then the other avenues of life start to open up for them, that probably aren't the healthiest for them, whether that's playing on video games or whatnot at this time, and spending probably too much time in front of an electronic device, which is we need to get them away from that. So no doubt this has been a big challenge for all the coaches that have been part of it, myself included. And we had to even go through that. Teresa, you touched on York 9 and the CPL, and we had to, believe it or not, we had to go through the exact same thing with professionals training. We started out with 4 players on the field. At once, we were only allowed 4 players in the entire field to train. So, and they couldn't touch each other or come near each other. So it was just basically individual training. And we did that for a number of weeks. So it was a big challenge for us to not only keep these players motivated, but keep ourselves motivated and keep ourselves as coaches motivated, because one, it's easier, not easy, but the player would show up for an hour and leave. We'd be there for another 2 or 3 hours because we have to cycle through the entire team. You're out in the field for a number of hours doing the exact same thing for a number of hours. So it was really challenging, not just for us as for the players to motivate them, but also to motivate yourselves as coaches during that time.
And to keep them fit. If they only have an hour on the field, I mean, to keep them fit to be able to play the game, right? Once everything comes back to normal, we hope, where there will be these games. I mean, that's a challenge if you're on the field only for an hour.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. You get me for 10 minutes and I could get them going. I could get them. They don't want to see me after 10 minutes. When they got to me, they were fearing some of the exercises and the running and stuff like that. So sometimes it doesn't take as long as you think. But yeah, 1 hour on the pitch really is very limited, and it isn't much. It isn't much at all in the bigger picture. Usually they're used to training for longer than that. But again, it's individual training, so it's a different aspect and a different challenge where you're inside of a team. You're not when you're not moving. When you're actually moving just yourself, 1 hour is quite a bit. You can do quite a bit with that.
Okay. And Carmelina, you already mentioned that if these gyms are closed, I mean, there's probably going to be more kids like Paul, to his point, that will drop out because there just isn't the opportunity to play right now. I don't know if you want to say more about that and other experiences during this pandemic for sports.
I'll just sort of wrap up that thought, is that we're going to have to do a lot as a community to make sure that we're promoting sport again, that we're making sure we have the safest environments, because if you really think about it, these kids will naturally want to move around, but it might be the parents that feel, you know, COVID is too risky, and the situation with contact sports is too risky. So the more that we can mitigate those risks as a community, whether it's me as a commissioner of a league, so having protocols that people trust, that we know safety is our ultimate priority, whether you're a club, a coach, a program, whatever the case, I think we're going to have to band together to promote the sport again, to get people out, trusting the sport, trusting health and safety, because there feels like there is a risk to contact others right now. Like that is, I don't know how long that's going to last, right? In the human psyche here, I have no idea what the after effects are going to be of a winter like this, but there's always hope. So we have to come together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's turn to our audience for some questions now. Matthew from the Center for Sport Capacity is here helping me today manage the chat room. And is there any activity, Matthew, with questions for our speakers from the audience?
Actually, there's quite a bit. So,
good.
Yeah. So our first question is, fandom has been very important to the growth of soccer. Will the league survive the pandemic, and how can they do something to include the women's leagues?
Will CPL survive? Is that what they're asking? And then the second part about women's league, is that correct? CPL?
Yeah. I mean, they were saying how fandom has been very important to the growth of soccer during this pandemic. Will it survive, and how can they do something to include the women's league?
Paul, do you want to talk about the first part, and then I can take the second one, maybe?
Yeah, I missed. What was the first part of that question? I missed that, Matt.
Fandom has been very important to the growth of soccer. Will the league survive the pandemic, and how can they do something to include the women's leagues?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the league tried every avenue throughout the summer to get a league going on the CPL on the men's side. It was just a tough go. I mean, with all the restrictions and the guidelines that needed to be followed, playing in empty stadiums week in and week out was just not viable for the league throughout that time. And also, it was just you're going through that. You're seeing if you can play. Is that an option? That's not an option. Do you go through a tournament? What size of a tournament? How long does the tournament last? Where do you play this tournament? So there's so many different boxes that they had to check, and so many different things to research and see at that time. What venue was the best? They came up with Prince Edward Island. We played, and then once you come up with a venue again, you're saying, okay, how many games are we going to play? Are we going to play everybody once? Are we going to play everybody twice? How long can we make it out there? Because you got to remember, being out in a hotel for a number of weeks is a challenge for anybody. It's you're not going out. And I've been away for a number of times with tournaments, and I've been away for 4 or 5 weeks at a time with a team. And Carmelina's even been away a lot longer on the women's side. Their trips are a lot longer than the men's sides ever were. But 4 or 5 weeks together is a lot. But at that time, you're always allowed to go out. You have a free evening here or there. You're able to take a stroll down the street, go to a coffee shop or whatnot. There, you're talking about just the hotel, the training pitch, or a game. So if you're not in one of those environments, you're at the hotel, and that's it. You're not leaving the hotel. So it was a challenge for everybody. So it was limited. They limited it to that month that we were there for, roughly 30, 35, 40 days if you got to the final, which was probably enough at that time. But that's what the decision was, is to come up with that kind of a tournament, to have the season there. So it was a challenge, like any other league had this year, but that's what the league went with. And hopefully, I think it's definitely going to survive. It's definitely going to go into 2021, and hopefully the momentum can build from that tournament. I know it was a great success. It was a big, they were well pleased with the event. So hopefully they can build off of that into 2021.
Yeah, I have to add to that. I covered the game through the media partner One Soccer, so I was an analyst for the tournament itself. So being on the other side of it, Paul was in the bubble, and I was observing the bubble. There was a lot to be said about the engagement in the tournament. It gave people hope, inspiration, something to talk about. Looking at football again, looking at a purely Canadian brand of football. I mean, a lot of positives, and what the league did to get that off the ground. I mean, even my boss, Eva Haveris, to get that, to be part of that team that logistically pulled off something that a lot of people didn't believe they could, was exceptional. And I think a sophomore year for the CPL was pivotal to keep the momentum going. Had this year been shut down completely, it would have been a very much an uphill battle to get it going again. But, it would have still happened. I don't think they're in any threat of losing the fandom. I think people are starved for sports, and they love Canadians, and that combination is going to keep them coming back. With regards to the women's side, I mean, listen, we need another hour for that, but I'll say it in a nutshell. We need to do more. For me, I'm not going to be shy to say that. We're proud of everything we've done. Yes, we're grateful, but we are also entitled to ask for more, especially when, you see that as a League One commissioner, we want to start to see that the performances mean something. You win the league, okay, now you advance to the next level, which is a tournament or a trip, or incentivizing the commitment that goes into playing football. And I would love to see a semi-professional level. I'd love to see a fully professional level, and we'll take the required steps. So I'm so proud of the CPL, and I'll be even prouder when there's a female equivalent.
Great. Our second question is, I was wondering about the soccer culture in Canada. There are no facilities for pickup soccer, especially in the winter, as opposed to outdoor hockey rinks that are located in every neighborhood. Would this elevate soccer culture in Canada?
Go ahead, Carmelina.
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, there's something recently tweeted by a colleague of mine, Henrik from Richmond Hill Soccer Club. He was talking about building cages outside, those ones you see in France where they're little mini soccer fields and they're surrounded by cages, and they're sort of dropped in communities, both rural and urban. And you start to see those arenas being more accessible, right? So you can play a little pickup football, and that just being a normalcy. Here in Canada, I think the building of those facilities would definitely contribute to changing our culture. There is no doubt about that. And the whole pickup culture, I know a few facilities here and there, you still have to pay. And by the way, you can't do that this whole winter. So to have other options are going to be key to continue to build our football culture. When you said earlier, Teresa, that we've overtaken hockey, it's very mind-blowing for me. If that's an objective fact, I'd still say I even think of hockey as the Canadian sport. So I'd love to see soccer get on that level. I didn't realize we were surpassing them in any way, but I'd love to see
in youth sports. Yeah, in the statistics I'm looking at in youth sports, yes, and they're saying that it's preferred for parents for their children over hockey, and I don't know if that's because it's less expensive. You're outside in the summer and playing soccer. I don't know what the reasoning behind that is, but yeah, for youth soccer, I found that fascinating as well.
Yeah, it's definitely the entry point. The price point is significantly lower. Having nephews that play hockey, it's night and day for the price. But I hear you. But that's definitely what we need to do. We need to build more facilities for people to pick up the ball and play around, and it not be hard to find.
I think also, just to touch on that, I think the biggest gap, though, we spoke a little bit about it earlier. I think if the numbers definitely are higher, I think, for registrations for soccer over hockey, but then you've got that when you're talking about the actual development of the game, and when you're talking about the high performance and the competitive part of the game, you're still thinking hockey still has that gap over a bigger gap over soccer. That's, I think, still a gap we need to fix. That's what I'm speaking about. I think soccer does a better job than hockey are doing in their grassroots. Hockey's now changed it. Hockey's gone from these. They were in the same scenario we talked about. They were in these big, huge rinks for kids, mind you. A 5-year-old playing in a full-size hockey rink, and a net that's huge for them as well. And again, it'd be the fastest skater get the puck, skate down the rink and score. Very similar to what we did. And I watched my son go through that, and I just was mind-boggling watching hockey still develop the same way as they did years and years ago. Very similar to how we did and how we did soccer when we grew up. And soccer had changed completely at that time. It had gone to these smaller facilities, smaller pitch sizes. But hockey, for some reason, was very, very reluctant to go to change anything that was a tradition to them. They've now actually been forced to change. Now they've gone to half a size rink. They've got borders on the side, on the middle of these ice rink. So they've got 2 games going instead of 1. So hockey has changed that. They're just a number of years late. But what they still do better than soccer, and my point being is that when they get into that higher competitive age group of 13, 14, 15, that pathway and that developmental time there is still better, and they still do a better job than probably what we're doing in football in Canada, because they're still able to have a better developmental high competitive age group there as to what we're doing in soccer, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next question is for Carmelina. Sorry, Paul. But it goes, I know you were fortunate enough to compete in the Canada Games back in 2001 in London, Ontario. I'm just wondering, what do you remember from that experience, and what was your most fond memory of the Canada Games?
Show the medal, Carmelina.
What's that?
Show the medal.
Yeah, there you go, right here. This is the one. You know what? I swear on everything that I really only remember my friends. I mean, I don't mean to say that as a little bit of a lesson here, and you remember the good times and everything. You don't remember all the performances. You don't remember. I think I scored a few goals. Like, I don't remember. I remember it's how you feel after these events. That's why sport is so important, to surround yourself with coaches and people that you enjoy, that make the sport fun. And that's not, as somebody, and as Paul probably maybe could echo this, as somebody that's been at the highest level, I still look back at my youth career as friends, son, and football. Like, all the things we get caught up in, about what level you are at, or if you're hopping clubs every 6 months, like Paul was talking earlier, you're always the grass is always greener, you're always going to go find the next thing because your kid's the best kid in the world. Like, you have to be where the child, the kid, the youth feels most cared for, has the most fun, and yes, is developing. It is possible to find all those things. So Canada Games for me, I remember laughing with my friends in the dorms in London. I just remember laughing in the off, like, not even in the field. I don't remember the performances literally at all, believe it or not. So that's an honest answer.
Now, are there any soccer funding initiatives that support getting those of low income or immigrant families into the game? Most elite travel programs get kind of pricey. Would you maintain diversity in the sport without supporting those with lower income?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big. I think we touched on it a bit with the hockey prices and other and the prices, but football is in a little bit of a danger route, and we're going into a situation where the cost is getting higher and higher. Indoor facilities cost a lot of money. I mean, that's obvious. That's one part of it. But once we're getting into a certain competitive range, soccer is becoming somewhat of an expensive sport. Not as expensive as hockey probably yet. Maybe not as expensive as individual sports. Tennis, figure skating, golf, those sports are still probably more expensive, but we're running a risk of the sport of outpricing a number of people who normally played this game when it was very, very cheap to play. And I've said it for a number of years. If we can get to the point where our high performance leagues are played at a much less cost for the players, if not any cost would be the ideal world. Obviously, that's probably more of a dream, but the market is definitely is too expensive when you're talking about an OPDL league. And for the viewers that are watching, that's probably it's an Ontario player developmental league where there's a number of clubs playing in it. Maybe, let's say, the highest level for women and men at a young age playing at 13, 14, 15, and 16, 17 years old, that age group. The cost is just getting very expensive. And in an ideal world, we'd have that in half next year. And even, I'd even go further to say it would be great to see that league being played on almost no cost. I mean, unrealistic, yes, but we're running we're on a fine line because it's getting to the point where it is very expensive, and for lower income families, it's becoming a challenge for them to be a part of a league that costs so much money to play.
Yeah, I know Ontario Soccer has subsidies and such, but again, those are limited, right? Like, I know that you would have to be able to apply for those, but that's, you're applying because you can't afford it. That's the whole point, if you get to the root of the problem. But I think there's also something about, I'm a big believer in all the research I've been doing, and regulatory frameworks on the way that we actually charge for these facilities. Like, if they're totally private, obviously the market rate will be whatever they want, but to be able to charge $1,000 for an hour at certain pitches, I mean, for me is I'm not a facility owner. I don't know their realities. I don't want to pass judgment, but we need the provincial governments and the federal governments to say that's too much. If taxpayers' money went into building those facilities in any way, there's no way it should cost what it does to run a training session. And then guess what? They have to impart those costs somewhere. These not-for-profit clubs, they can't absorb those costs. It's going to go into the members. So because 6 months of our year is indoors, I would love to see people lobbying for lower rates on the indoor facilities, because they are scarce. And, you do get ahead in the game if you own your own. But again, it's still, you hold your own pretty tight, right? So this is all coming from experience. You have to, the business models, either they turn for profit, which changes the whole thing, or you have to manage how much these people are willing, facility owners are able to charge your programs. You settle for an eighth of the pitch, which is not good for development at certain ages most of the time, because that's all you can afford. So for me, it's a bigger problem. I think we need to scan out and lobby for some changes there, to be honest. That's my feeling.
I agree.
Yeah.
How did you manage being an athlete and a student?
Say that again, Matt, you cut out.
How did you manage being an athlete and a student?
Paul, you want to take this one?
Well, yeah, mine was easy. It didn't last that long, so it wasn't too bad. No, I did. I was in the States for one season, 1 year, one academic year. I was at Clemson University for that time, and I think I managed it quite well. You just got to manage your time. I think you just have to be able to manage that time. To get to that level for any athlete is like I say to any of these young kids, it's hard work, it's dedication, and it's discipline. And if you're able to get to that level already, you've already instilled that in your mindset and in your person. So it's just getting to that level. When you're growing up, I touched on it earlier, when you're training every weekend and you have to train at 8 a.m. or very early, you're not going out, you're not partying, you're not doing the things that all your other friends or all your other schoolmates are doing, but you've made a choice and you've made a sacrifice and you made that dedication to do that. So that comes along with it. You're already instilled in you. You already have developed that part of your character. And I think once you do that, you're able to balance that time. You're able to balance the sport and the academic part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, start those time management early. I started my son early, in first, second grade. Gave him a calendar. I said, put all your practices, your games, and then around it you have to put when your tests are, when your assignments are due. And yeah, I think, Paul, you're right. Once you get to a higher level, that's ingrained, that time management. And Carmelina, I'm sure you had to do the same, right?
Yeah, it's very much the same. I went to Penn State for 4 years, and it took me 4.5 because I took a semester off for football, for an event, a tournament. So it took me 4.5 to graduate. And, you know, anything, you can do anything you want in the sense of prioritizing it, right? Like, I was there on a scholarship for football. So for me, it was a no-brainer. And I had to do what I needed to do to earn my right to stay there. You know, it was a privilege to play sports and study. You know, that for me, if you have, it starts with the mindset, and then anything's sort of possible with regards to your time management. I'll give you another example as an adult, like slotting in an hour for working out right now is like pulling teeth because I don't really want to. But you learn the discipline to do what you need to do to be successful. And you know what in college and university, usually your targets and your goals are pretty clear. You know what you're trying to achieve in your classrooms and in your classes, and you know what you're trying to achieve in the sporting arena and the athletic arena. So yeah, just, you know, it translates into my day-to-day now. I'm very disciplined. I have a good structure to my day, and I think it keeps me disciplined and happy to have, you know, good time management skills and know when to shut off as well. It's all the things. It teaches you how to be an adult. So it's good.
And I suppose too, I mean, we didn't touch on this, but youth sports just help to develop those leadership skills too in young people, right?
Time. Oh, big time. I mean, learning how to deal with the wins, how to be humble in the wins, how to celebrate them, but then get back on task right away, how to process the losses, how to be a good teammate, how to play all the different roles. Are you on the bench? Are you starting? Are you injured? I mean, it teaches you all those things, whether you want to or not. Sort of puts you through the lesson, the gamut, right? All the lessons you need to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Matt, is there more? I'm sure there is.
Oh, there's a lot more. What are your thoughts as someone who was involved in a professional sport, the idea of equality of play? I know that it exists in the Women's National Basketball Association when one compares the merit and careers of Sue Bird and LeBron James, yet LeBron James makes so much more. What are your thoughts?
You want me to comment on this one? Yeah, I mean, there's definitely the equity argument where, you know, I listened to somebody the other day say, well, women can't dunk. So the entertainment value of a WNBA game versus what LeBron or some of the men can do, just sheer entertainment of the sport is different. And the reason I don't agree with that at all is because although there's an objectivity, again, you know, they can do this, we can do that, all those comparisons, I think we need to sort of stop comparing. I think they're separate products. They play the game differently. If you can't dunk, guess what? You're going to be a better shooter. Guess what? You're going to dribble. You're going to be able to dribble and penetrate the ball, the net and the basket differently. So just, you know, appreciating things for what they are. I try to, as many times as I possibly can, to get away from equality because the market is different. You can't ask people to pay the same dollar that they would for whatever, but I would say more effort into honing in on what makes women's sports special. Mm-hmm. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see more targeted marketing, not as much copy and paste, right? So, you know, if Sue Bird gets paid, I think it was like $215K, and then LeBron's making $47 million, you know, or whatever it is, you know, that gap is ridiculous, but stop comparing it. And we have to start as consumers, maybe we start helping the cause by watching the sport a little bit more, by, you know, if that really aggravates you, what are you doing about it? You know, it's sort of like you can't dictate the market will speak. But more investment in making women's sports front and center, more marketable, more specific to that audience, and celebrate. And I think when we do that, it'll start to, and more visible. I mean, people don't even know about it. It's not even on TV enough for people to invest in it. So let's get it out there. Let's support it. And let's make it the best it can possibly be without the comparison.
Carm, this one's for you again. Curious as to why you mentioned our own women's league as opposed to the National Women's Soccer League expansion into Canada. Is one more feasible than the other?
Fantastic question. The question around NWSL to Canada, I'm a big ally of that movement, and it is a movement. We have a lot of people working very hard to bring an NWSL franchise to Canada, and what a source of pride that will be to participate in one of the best leagues in the world, and to hopefully have some Canadians on that team. But that's where, you know, I'm an ally of that movement, but my passion lies in providing more opportunities and a few roster spots on one franchise in one market. I think we need to service the country. I think there's 99% of women that have to quit at 22 that would love to sharpen their teeth and to start to get into a league for 6 to 8 months of the year. So, you know, TFC coming to town, Paul, you could speak about this. It changed the whole landscape of professional sports for men. We started to believe what was possible, the fandom that came out of that, all the amazing trickle effect. So if we were to get NWSL, I feel it would have the same effect. We'd be so excited about women's sports, but then guess what? CPL comes along. So if NWSL comes here, that does not stop. It does not tick the box and say, that's all, we're good now. We have professional sports. Nope. We still need to continue to working on a domestic product to service more women, more coaches, more match officials, marketing, and the whole industry would be serviced. And I'm excited about how many jobs that's going to create, because it's going to be a whole other thing. So it's just different, and they're both important in our history.
I'll touch on that. Carmelina is 100% correct, because if you took the model from the men's side, we got first Toronto FC, then we got the Vancouver Whitecaps and the Montreal Impact come into the MLS, and very, very similar. Did it actually help the development of Canadian football on the men's side? And they won't like to hear this, but the blunt answer is no, it didn't. None of the clubs will like that answer, but the bottom line is it didn't help the numbers in Canadian football for the men's side develop. It's becomes a few roster spots that Canadians get to play on, but in the end of it, that can be overshadowed by other players. And it's not saying that Canadians had to play. They had a few roster spots, but it wasn't really developing Canadians to play in that league. It was an expansion for the MLS. It was a way to market their league north of the border and develop more fans and have more fans watch their games, whether on television or in the stadium. But did it really develop any part of the game for footballing Canadian footballers? Not necessarily. It's done a better job for sure with their academies in the last number of years. That I will agree with. But the bigger picture, the bigger number of players at 18, 19 years old, with the number of footballers we have, there has to be a different avenue and a bigger avenue for them to play a part of, and that being the CPL. And again, same for hopefully for what the women would have in the potential future of them having a league in Canada where they're able to play as well.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, this one's for you. With a lack of possibility to physically practice during the pandemic, has the need for mental practice, especially at the elite level, been prioritized? Do you work with psychologists to help improve performance amongst young athletes?
No, not directly. I haven't worked with any psychologist. Is that the question? Have I worked with them directly?
Yeah.
No.
To prioritize mental practice right now?
No. Okay. Short answer on them. No, I haven't worked with any of them directly. But I think when you're talking about young kids, I try not to get. You try not to make it an issue. You just try to get it as normal as possible with them. And at the beginning of the pandemic, when everything was completely closed and we were able to do nothing, it was basically getting them on a Zoom and getting them a ball at their feet and going through these mindless exercises that I had to do for hours on end. But that was just, it was tough on me because you're doing these things for repetitive things, but it was for the benefit of them. And it was just, were they improving their individual skills a little bit? Some were dribbling around in a little room in their house because that's all they had, and it's great. That's what they were able to do. So we were doing that about 3 times a week for about an hour on each age group that we were part of, that we were doing. So it was just doing that. And again, it was almost nothing to do with the physical side. It was always a lot to do with the mental side and giving them that physical outlet where they could do something as well. But I wasn't really directing it purposely mentally, but I knew by them just doing that, that was helping them tick that box. One, physically, and also being able to do something mentally. They were able to see their friends on the screen and interact with them a little bit as well. So you know right away that that's helping them.
I went through that experience, Paul, and my son would say, "Stand over here," and when the coach says, "Throw the ball." And it was fun for them though to see.
Yeah, no, I know they liked it. I know they loved it. So again, we were doing that for them. It was just, and it was tough. It was like sitting in front of the video games or doing. So you had to pull them away, and we knew that we had to do something to offer them an outlet, or else it was difficult for them. And yeah, just offering that little bit of 1 hour. Feedback from the parents, especially knowing how much it was difficult for us, but knowing that they really enjoyed it, and their day was made just from that little hour that they were able to have a ball at their feet and run around and see their friends on a screen and play with the ball.
As a former professional football players, do you feel compelled as parents to install the same level of interest of football among your children?
I don't have children, so Paul, this is you. There you go.
I think you can't. I think you can only show examples and lead by examples. I think you can't instill anything into a kid. I think kids learn from what they see, not from being told what to do. I think if you tell your kids, and just from experience, if you tell them what to do over and over, there comes a certain time when, they get to a certain age where they're not, they're only doing it because you told them to do it, but that only lasts for a number of time, until a certain age. So it's showing them and letting them make a decision and letting them make their own decisions. And by showing them certain examples and by showing them hard work and what dedication was and what it is, you think you're guiding them into a direction where that they're hopefully able to make that decision themselves. As a parent, what I try to say all the time is that when your kid is alone, are you confident that they're going to make the right decisions? Because you can't make the decision for them then. So that's something that is a challenge no matter what, but you can instill. It's difficult to say that you're going to instill that into them. It's only being able to guide them, and hopefully if it's the direction that they want to go in sport, it is the direction they want to go in sport. But you're just trying to make them good people, and you're trying to make them be good people in life, work hard, be successful, whatever avenue that is, whether that's in sport or whether that's in any kind of business or any kind of job that they want to do in the future.
I'll echo that, Paul. I was a swimmer, and I had all my kids in the water at 5 months old, teaching them how to swim. They're great swimmers, but not one of them chose swimming.
Yeah.
And you're right. You have to let them choose what they want. One's tennis, one's soccer, and they're happy. They're happy doing that sport. So I'm happy they know how to swim too.
Oh yeah, it's important, but it's like you said, it's they're going to make the choice, and whatever that choice is, fantastic. It's you can't say to them, like I said, you can't pick what they want to do. You can only just give them an opportunity, and they do what they feel they're best at and what they're happiest doing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Thank you. I think we have time for maybe another 2 questions. Matt, if there's more.
This one's for Paul. I'm interested to know about your time at Clemson, as they are arguably the best American college football program in the U.S. I was wondering if soccer was taken seriously at Clemson and if the sport was popular to watch on campus.
Yeah, their soccer program, strange that you asked that right now, because it was just today that I found the news that my old coach that was there passed away today. So it was unfortunate to hear that.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, no, it was. I haven't. One of my friends made me aware of that today. So yeah, I spent only 1 year there playing there, but it was taken very, very seriously. Soccer there, no doubt. The program was one of the better ones in the country. The ACC was one of the highest ranked conferences in the country at the time, and still remains. But believe it or not, probably our soccer team was probably better than the football team at that time. The football team now in the last number of years has completely taken off, and it was I couldn't understand it back then because it was a hidden gem there. The stadium was massive, 70,000 seat stadium that they had there on campus, a gymnasium, a workout room that was the size of half a soccer pitch almost. It was massive. So the infrastructure and the facilities they had available for all their sports was just phenomenal that they had there. But definitely, no, soccer was definitely taken very, very serious. And like I said, at the time, we were probably ranked higher than the American football team during that time.
Yeah. Carmelina, how about Penn State? I grew up right outside of Philadelphia, so when I heard you were there at Penn State, that must have been a great experience. I love that city.
Yeah, definitely. State College, Pennsylvania, very unique, dead center of the state. I went there because it was 6 hours away, so proximity to home was a big part of my decision making. But with the institution itself, I mean, it's one of those. It's a dream school. I mean, they have, like he mentioned, I think our stadium was 110,000. Not that I'm comparing, by the way, but Penn State is its own. It's its own culture. It's its own. It's its own world. To be quite honest with you, our soccer field is still to this day one of the best in the country. Jeffrey Field. We played there. We were there when all the renovations were made. We were number 1 in the country for one of my senior year, and we went to 2 Final Fours. So from an athletic experience, I mean, there's nothing better. Ali Krieger was on the team there. I went to school with her. Tiffany Weimer, who's one of the best goal scorers in the game in the States, like a really star-studded group. And I felt very lucky to be part of it as a foreigner. They made me feel very welcome. And those women are still some of my best friends today. So I would say that the U.S. experience is no better or worse than the Canadian experience, which is very different. I mean, to have a sport like American football to drive that level of revenue is very unique culturally. To recreate that in Canada would be very tough. We're not fanatics that way here. It's different. Like I'm telling you, the people that would show up, 110,000 people every single home game. It was something to be admired. I mean, I can't make sense of it, and we definitely don't have that sporting culture here in Canada, and it doesn't make us worse, but it's not the same.
Yeah, I heard with tennis, if you play down south in Georgia, for instance, the stadiums are packed at the collegiate level, and that you feel like you're playing pro tennis. So, and that's how it was in soccer at Penn State. So it's amazing to see it at that level for collegiate, right?
Definitely.
No, I mean, there's one thing I will say for the American culture and their sports is such a massive thing for them, and they have massive amount of pride in all their levels of sport, and they're a part of it, whether that's at the high school levels. We haven't even touched on the high school level because even that is even a huge industry itself in the U.S. and it's a big part of their upbringing as well, and it leads to the college level and into the pro level. So something we can probably take into our country here is that the pride that they have in their sport, which we still could probably do a little bit better job of in terms of supporting our own.
Agreed.
And our last question is, what challenges does Canada have to face when assembling a team to either win a Olympic gold medal or a World Cup?
What challenges do we have?
Yeah, what challenges would you guys face?
You know what? At this point, the pandemic has been the greatest equalizer in the sport. So not getting together even during FIFA windows is, of course, a huge challenge. But what's really shifted in the team from when I played on it till sort of now, which is I'm only retired 5 years. It's not that long. But before, we had all our players as marketable as they are, as talented as they are, this new generation, Kadisha Buchanan, Ashley Lawrence, Adriana Leon, all the ones that are over in Europe playing. Those environments are taking care of their day-to-day, making sure they're true pros. You know, all the players down in the NWSL. So there's nobody in the pool for women that doesn't have an environment to play in. So for us, that's new. Because that was not the case when I played, you would have camps for months because the national team became your club team, essentially, because there was really no other place to go. So they would put us through, we called them centralized residencies. We would live in a dorm, we'd train every day. That was our only job. And, you know, because it's a big deal to podium at an Olympics, there's not only pride and seeing the flag rise and all the great stuff, there's a lot of money associated with being on a podium. So they put a lot of investment into the program, and they're still doing that. But now it's only FIFA windows where women get together and play, and they get like 1 week to get back on the same page together. That's a challenge, I think, for every country. I don't think we're unique. That's what the rest of the world is dealing with, and we have to deal with that as well. So I don't know. What do you think, Paul?
No, I mean, it's the exact same on the men's side. I mean, that's what the men have been doing for forever, basically, is that they've been getting together on a similar to what Carmelina is saying. Everyone belongs to their club. You develop at your club. You play your football week in and week out of your club, and then on a FIFA window, you come together for a couple, sometimes only a couple of days, and you have and you're ready to play your game. So the challenge is there. You're not there nearly as you're not there together nearly enough to develop, or for the coach even to develop exactly what he wants. It's a short window. The only really chance he probably has, or she has, to work with their squad is if they're entering a tournament or going into a tournament, whether that be the Olympics, the World Cup, the Gold Cup, whatever that may be at that time. Mm-hmm. So I think because once you have a tournament, you've kind of got that couple of weeks before, and then you're playing in that tournament where you're together for another at least 2-3 weeks, where you're able as a coach to develop and implement your systems a little bit more. As to the biggest challenge at the national teams level is that you're just not able to work with your squad enough time, or put enough hours onto the training pitch as you would be with a club level.
Spot on.
That's all our questions.
That's all our questions. Wow, we made it to the end. That's perfect. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Matthew, for helping me today with the audience, and I'm glad we got through all those questions. And I would also like to thank the Center for Sports Capacity for supporting this event and for taking care of all of the logistics today, and to the Modern Languages, Literatures, and Cultures, where Italian Studies program is housed in the Faculty of Humanities. Carmela Colella is the coordinator of the Italian Studies program and the chair of Modern Language, Literatures, and Cultures, and she assisted with this event, and we're really, the program, the Italian Studies program, we're really grateful to her and for all her help to me and to making this happen. We're also very grateful to Julie Stevens. She's the special advisor to the president of Brock University on the Canada Games. And we're happy for her support and this great team that she gave us today, the Center for Sport Capacity, who ran this webinar. And I want to acknowledge Christina Stalteri. She introduced me to Carmelina so that we would have this great discussion with both Paul and Carmelina, and it really turned out to a wonderful day together. Mille grazie to our speakers. Thank you, Paul and Carmelina, for being here. I know you have busy schedules, coaching, and all you're doing for soccer here in Ontario. Thank you for coming and sharing your experience and thoughts with us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. I enjoyed that.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Matthew. It was an excellent way to spend the day. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks so much.